This and more is a Republican member of the House, Congressman Austin Scott of Georgia. Congressman, thanks so much for being with us, and congratulations on your reelection. You just got reelected. Let me start with this. CNN has learned McCarthy is calling GOP members one by one, trying to get their votes. Do you think he'll be the next Speaker of the House? What's your sense of it?
I do, and he didn't have to call me. I called him and said, hey, if you need me to make calls on your behalf, be glad to. He's earned the right to be the Republican leader. I do think Republicans will have the majority when all of the votes are counted. It will be more narrow than we had hoped for, but he's earned the right to be the Speaker of the House, and so I support Kevin McCarthy. I think given the chance to be the Speaker, he'll do a good job. And what we as the Republican conference have got to do is to stand by our leadership that won. We had hoped for a bigger margin, but we won. And so let's take that margin. Let's go do the things that we said we were going to do, and govern instead of picking fights among ourselves.
And I know you're favored at this point to take the majority. I guess we should note to our viewers and remind we're still in the process of counting all the votes, and so we're not quite there yet. But let me ask you this, because you indicated this just a few moments ago. There had been all of these predictions of a big Republican red wave. It didn't happen. What's your sense of it? Why do you think that is?
Well, my sense is that all politics is local, Jim. And so when you have great candidates at the top of the ticket for a governor and for Senate, then that typically pulls people in, and you get the Republican vote to go all the way down and helps you with the House races. But people don't come to the poll simply to vote for a member of the House of Representatives for the most part. So I think you get into these areas where they had better candidates at the top of the ticket, if you will, than we did. And so we didn't have some of the seats that we had hoped to pick up. But there are also a lot of seats, Jim, that you look at where there's some pretty close margins in there in seats that the Democrats should have won pretty handily. So it's still a win for Republicans. When the votes are all counted, I think we'll have the House of Representatives. I think Kevin McCarthy's earned the right to be Speaker, and given the chance, he'll be a good Speaker.
Do you think it helped that Trump came out at the end and was doing those campaign rallies in certain states, sort of putting his face out there, and in some cases, talking more about himself than the other candidates who were actually running?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, he was a great president. He did a lot of good things. I think sometimes the tweets, if you will, hurt him. But there are a lot of people out there, including myself, that appreciate what President Trump did from a policy standpoint as president. And he was the Republican president. We'd be in a lot better shape right now economically. Russia would not be inside the Ukraine as far as they are if President Trump were president. And so I wish he were still my president. Now, certainly there are areas where, people dislike him as much as some of us like him. But I mean, he was a good president. Gas would be $2 a gallon right now if he were still president, and Russia would not be all over the Ukraine like they are, and candidly, Afghanistan wouldn't have collapsed. So a lot of bad things that happened would not have happened if Donald Trump were president right now.
Well, I know if we had a Democratic member of the Congress on with us right now, they would challenge some of those assertions that you made. But let me press you on that point just a little bit further. It sounds as though you're saying that he has been a polarizing presence, and that perhaps that polarizing presence maybe didn't help in all cases.
I agree that I would agree with you in the assessment that he is polarizing, but I would also tell you that when it came to making sure that we had a strong military, in making sure that our international policy was consistent with not just what was right for America, but what was best for the world, I think Donald Trump did a much better job for that than Joe Biden has done. And when it came to our domestic energy policy, Donald Trump understood that you could have domestic energy production while at the same time supporting alternative sources with continued investments in research so that we could have clean energy when clean energy was actually mature enough to come into the market.
But given all of that, and again, I'm sure if there's a Democratic member on, they'd challenge you on some of those assertions there, but given all of that, do you think he should come in and campaign for Herschel Walker?
I absolutely hope that Donald Trump is making robocalls to all of his supporters, asking Herschel Walker, asking them to go support Herschel Walker. Now let's be honest about what happened in Georgia. The Democratic Party spent a couple of $100 million talking about Herschel Walker and Herschel's experiences in life. Now, Herschel has been totally transparent about those experiences. He's used those experiences from decades ago to try to help other people who have struggled. And many people who are as famous as Herschel Walker have had those same struggles. While at the same time, there's been very little said about Senator Warnock, whose divorce records and child custody records are still sealed, is my understanding. And so the Democrats were effective in making it about the person instead of the policy. And so
Well, you don't want to get into a situation where you're insinuating things about Raphael Warnock, do you?
Well, they're insinuating a lot of things about Herschel Walker as well. You know, I mean, Herschel was totally transparent and honest.
But his own family, he's had his own family members come out and speak out against him.
Herschel Walker is actually in the interview. Herschel Walker is actually in the interview with his former wife, and that screen was actually clipped to make it look like something that it wasn't in that interview. And then the Democratic Party spent hundreds of millions of dollars about that. We want this race needs to be about the issues, not about the men. I mean, Herschel Walker understands that we need an energy independence. Herschel Walker understands that we need some bipartisanship in Washington, D.C. Joe Biden has done nothing in a bipartisan manner, and Raphael Warnock has voted with him virtually 100% of the time. Now, Jim, I've been in Congress 12 years now.
Oh, the president did reach out, though, on infrastructure. Isn't that right, Congressman? I mean, he did reach out in some areas and asked for Republican support and got it in some cases.
I've been in Congress 12 years, and I have never met Joe Biden. So for people who think that he operates in a bipartisan manner, I'm on the Armed Services Committee. We passed the National Defense Authorization Act 58-1 out of that committee. I'm on the Ag Committee. I'm on two very bipartisan committees. I've never met Joe Biden. He is not a bipartisan president. And the only way to bring some balance to this is for us to elect Herschel Walker. The balance of the Senate, I believe, will rest with Georgia.
Well,
and
Congressman,
so if we elect Herschel Walker, we'll have a Senate that will support energy independence.
Yeah, let me jump in, though, because the president has said in the aftermath of the election he would like to have Republicans to come in and work with him on certain issues. Let's play a little bit of that, and I'll get your response on the other side.
And let me say this. Regardless of what the final tally in these elections show, and there's still some counting going on, I'm prepared to work with my Republican colleagues. The American people have made clear, I think, that they expect Republicans to be prepared to work with me as well.
What do you think of that?
I just don't think he's telling the truth. I mean, Jim, we've given him a chance, and if he calls and he wants to meet, we'll meet with him. But this idea that we're going to bend over backwards to follow his agenda when we think his agenda is bad for America, that's not where we can go. But I'll go back a few years, Jim. I was actually elected president of the freshman class in 2010 when we came in 2011. Barack Obama, Joe Biden, 6 years. I was president of the class, never met Joe Biden. I met Barack Obama one time. It was at a Christmas party where he took a picture with my wife and I, or we took a picture with him. We offered then to meet. We told them, we promised them we would keep it on the issues, not personalities. And what did they do? They continued to brand us the way they wanted to. The press followed along with them. They never met with us. I haven't met Joe Biden in my 12 years of serving in Congress. And if you look at my record,
Donald Trump wasn't exactly Mr. Bipartisanship himself. I mean, you're talking about, Trump's gas prices and Trump's foreign policy. I mean, Democrats would obviously disagree with all of those things. They would say that obviously the gas prices are down during a pandemic. President Trump, when he was in office, was cozying up to Vladimir Putin. I mean, they would. These are the things that they would say to you in response to some of these assertions that you were making. But on top of all of that, I mean, Donald Trump routinely demonized Democrats. He would hold rallies where he would talk about Democratic members of Congress and say, send them back, and say all sorts of terrible things. I mean, he wasn't exactly the picture of bipartisanship. Isn't that why your own governor, Governor Kemp, held Trump at arm's length, did not really want him in the state, probably doesn't want him in the state very much now?
Jim, if you look at the votes, there are 4 major votes after COVID hit. 4. They dealt with budget-related issues, PPP, everything after COVID in that 24-month period. There were 4 major votes. All of them were done in very much a bipartisan manner. President Trump negotiated with the Democrats on those issues. If you go back and you look at the Senate votes and the House votes, you'll see that the majority of Democrats voted with President Trump on those issues, and that is because he actually sat down and negotiated with them and discussed things with them. So what President Trump did with his tweets and Twitter and all of that stuff, I didn't like that as well. But there was the negotiations and the actual votes that occurred in Washington, D.C., Jim. And if you'll go I wish I had those votes in front of me, but if you go pull those key votes, you'll see that they were very much bipartisan because Donald Trump actually negotiated with Democrats.
Well, Congressman, we've run out of time. We'd love to have you come back another time. We can talk about all of these things. I mean, I was covering the White House. I remember when Donald Trump, was willing to shoulder the blame for shutting down the government. I mean, I did not see a whole lot of bipartisanship demonstrated by the former president during that time, all the way up to the run-up to January 6th and what took place that day and ever since. But Congressman Scott, thank you very much for your time. All right, we'll go back and look at it. And let's have you on another time. We'll talk about it. Thanks so much. Appreciate it, Congressman.